All right. Welcome, everybody, to Fine Tuning Friday, where each week we dive into the latest and greatest in AI. And today's focus is going to be how we blend real world footage with AI to direct a winter fox, which actually isn't a winter fox, but is Matt Uhry's dog. So, Matt, welcome to Fine Tuning Fridays. If you want to give a little brief about yourself, what you do for work, and some of the cool projects you worked on in the past, I think that'll help set the stage for why you're excited
Yeah,
about AI.
absolutely. I started out as a cinematographer. I went to art school and actually started as a sculptor, and then kind of quickly got into film as a cinematographer. I've worked almost every position on a film set that can be worked. I shot 7 or 8 feature films, a ton of music videos, commercials. I worked at Pixar for 2 years on Toy Story 2 as a essentially supervising lighting and layout. And after that, I got into sort of being a director cameraman, and eventually narrowed down to specialize in filming animals, for pet brands typically, or other kinds of things that use animals for. And that takes us to here. Suddenly we're doing AI, and of course I'm doing animals again because go to what you know, right? So
Incredible.
yeah,
Yes. Yes, that brings us to this project. I jokingly said, can AI be man's best friend? Because the goal of this film was to, one, just get you up to speed with the latest and greatest in AI, but two, you have a really well-trained border collie that you went out into the
yeah,
field with and wanted to see if you could turn it into a winter fox.
yeah. It actually started with I think about August of last year. I just had, I've been kind of avoiding AI before then. I mean, I used Midjourney to make some artwork that I used to replace some other artwork that was copyright in a couple commercials. And, I hadn't really been using AI for video much. It just didn't look good to me yet. And then Bruce was like, "Hey, just, give it a try. Like, just get out and play with it." And I was like, "Okay." And so I filmed my actually not that dog, but another border collie, and out in the forest behind my house, and you know, put it in a runway as a video input model, and turn him into a fox. And I was like, "That's cool." And I was like, "What if I make it winter?" And I was like, "Oh, this actually like looks good. This kind of maybe has legs." And so I actually shot this film, thinking that I probably would do it in runway, and it just would be a test. I wasn't going to show it to anybody because it probably wouldn't be very good. And I mean, I feel confident in the part about filming the dogs and making that kind of thing. But my at that point, my ability to use AI, I didn't really feel very confident in it. And so, and the results I was getting from Runway, the winter scenes looked pretty good, but the fox was pretty horrendous. Not the movement was actually good, but his actual the detail and performance from it wasn't that great. And then Bruce was like, "Hey, let's try." Bruce is making his new app called Conductor, and I've known Bruce a long time, and we've co-directed things. We're co co-conspirators and co-collaborators on a lot of different things. And so we started doing it, and it took a while. It took about a couple weeks to start getting good results, and then suddenly there was just one day when I don't even remember what it was that we did, and we got a fox that looks a lot like the one on the right there that looked really good, and suddenly my I had these incredible performances, and I was able to close the mouth because my dog's tongue is hanging out there all the time. Foxes don't really do that,
Yeah, that
and get
was
him
one
to do those kind of things. Yeah,
I want to
so
dig into that with Bruce and you a bit later because that was a fun one
yeah,
as I was testing the new models. But why don't we go ahead and play the clip for
yeah. Let's
everybody? So
let's watch the film.
thank
Through hemlock dark and snowy pine, the fox kept low, his path a line. He wove a hush of winter's keep. His paws fell light, the drifts were deep. At last he came where windows shone and saw a warmth he'd never owned. The world divides by door and den between the fox and the homes of men. And so he vanished, soft and slow, a flame of fur against the snow.
Incredible. So we've got a
Awesome.
bunch of the team on the call right now. James, who did some of the LoRa training, and Bruce, who helped with some of the crazy ComfyUI workflows and some of the technology under the hood. I do also want to give you a shout out for the video you put together of the behind the scenes. And while I don't necessarily think we need to play the whole thing right now, I do want to
No,
just,
you have me here. I can do it. I can do it
yeah,
live.
we
So,
can do it
yeah.
live. And I think I'll pull that up just so we can kind of show the under the hood, the depth maps, and the thing you shot versus the thing that came out the other end. So let me find that and pull that up. But yeah, if you want to talk a little about the inspiration, and what went into making this film while I pull up the BTS.
Well, yeah. So, the genesis for the film was, I came across this poem that I liked a lot, and I modified it a bit and edited it down to kind of a length. And maybe here we go. We can see this kind of split screens are pretty cool with the fox and the world. Gives you a sense. Some of this was shot in Colorado, and some of it was shot in the forest up here. That shot was flipped. It wasn't a mirror image. Yeah. I'm
So
glad I wore
yeah,
a
I
different
mean,
shirt.
a lot of this was you and your camera skills and your handheld nature that you like to film. Do you want to talk a bit about the directability and how you use that, but instead of just prompting the models out of the gate?
Yeah, for sure. So I find it very, even with the newer, better models that we've recently sort of seen, right now I'm using Kling 3.0 a lot. That to describe, and especially in animals, because again, that's mostly kind of what I do. Describe the action and the timing and the subtle changes in camera are incredibly painful right now, I think, in terms of describing that in a text prompt. And there may be some shortcomings on my side where I maybe need to get better at prompting, but it's also just very hard to describe, like, well, the dog is walking in a sort of moody manner. Like, what does that look like to an AI model? There's not necessarily a big enough training body or even necessarily an agreement of what that is to have it be able to interpret that into something that's usable, for a dramatic thing. And I feel like so much, when you actually have a specific idea of what you want something to feel like, that's when it gets really difficult with AI to get it to actually adhere to that specific idea. You can certainly type in a prompt and get something back that's pretty cool, but the to get it to actually do things specifically that give specific performances that are like come in a shot that's before and after another shot and need to have a lot of elements that match. And even with the multi-take, models, it's really difficult to get those to adhere. And the one way to straighten out a lot of that kind of stuff is if you just pre-shoot it as a video, and then you've already got your motion, your animals exist in depth and with gravity and all those kinds of things. You have an environment, you have a lot of specifics of framing. The camera being 2 inches lower on set, you just sort of go down 2 inches. In AI, you sit there and prompt for it, and sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you change a whole bunch of other things. Sometimes you get one thing that you want and five things you don't want. It kind of gets you out of a lot of that kind of stuff with the camera work and with the physical performance, where someone's standing and when they move and the timing. So that's a real case for shooting a video first. Um,
Yeah, and as a part of this, I wanted to take some of the latest and greatest models that are out there today. Like Nano Banana 2 has a lot of hype, and for good reason.
yeah.
It's a great model. And then these newer Kling models, and granted, some of these prompts probably could be improved, but just want to give you a sense of like some of the challenges with consistency. So for this specific one, I took still of the dog on the kind of hillside here, and then some of the reference images that you gathered of the fox, and ran it through Nano Banana 2, asking it to replace the dog with the fox. And you can even see this was the same prompt and the same reference images and four different shots on goal. And you're like, okay, that's four different foxes that came out, and some of them the lighting looks like it matches. Some of them it looks more like it just like copied and pasted it into the scene. This one's probably the worst one of them all with the tongue out. But you can see how this can get pretty tedious if you're working, taking multiple rolls of the dice to get the exact fox you want. And then you have to go to the next scene and you have to do the whole process over again and
Right. Like
compare
you're going to
them.
get like a perfect fox eventually that is a certain version of a fox on the rock, but then in the next shot, like he's going to have like instead of having those black socks on his legs, they're going to go only up to his wrists or something. It's going to just be, even like natural variants. If you had two different foxes, there would be things that are different about them. But you're telling a story about a one fox who's on an adventure to go do
Yeah.
whatever it is he's trying to do, and so yeah, that's where, having, and we can put in photo references and it does help, but when a real breakthrough in this was when we made a LoRA of the fox and a LoRA of the snow world, and we're able to really get like a lot more specific control, over how it looked. And
Yeah.
in hindsight, like I probably would have probably followed what the advice Bruce I think was trying to give me, but I maybe didn't exactly follow of really just make the same fox a bunch of times over and over, and that way you have a very pure input of like the LoRA isn't confused about like it's not a composite of five different foxes that you liked. It's maybe just like one fox that you generated a whole bunch of times in Nano Banana perhaps, and so we learn, right, as we go along, and that's a real thing. And I would
Yeah.
love to go film like a real fox live, in video and train Laura in video on that, and so I get a certain kind of specific motion,
Totally.
and to be able to caption it and like name those different kind of things, because my version of a moody walk might be different than Greg's, or like it turns and looks happily, what's that look like for a fox, what
Yeah. Yeah.
all,
And I
all
want to
the
get
all
into
these kind of
the nitty.
subtleties are something that you can keep with the training, and that's like an incredibly powerful tool for a director, I think.
Totally. I'm excited to get into a little under the hood of LoRa training. And we can talk about the meanings of different words and collecting a data set and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I might have jumped ahead like to the second part of this, so
It's a
we
good
can go.
preview. It's a good preview. Um, and so, but before we got there, I think it is always good to start with some prompting, some prompt engineering, and just get a feel for what the model can do. So this is one of the shots from the film or from the behind the scenes. And the first thing I did was see if we could put this into Kling Video O3 Pro reference to video, which is a pretty beefy model. You can give it start frames, you can give it end frames, you can even give it reference images and then more reference images. So you could say, this is a reference image of the front of the fox. This is a reference image of the sides of the fox. I think actually I populated it here or in one of these. This might have just been a continue from the first frame. But anyways, you can give a little context to the model here. It's not quite a full LoRa training, but you can get pretty good results here. The main thing I want to point out is the directability is much harder if you're just purely working with text prompts and not reference videos here. So describing that we wanted it to jump down this way, it had a hard time just like adhering to the prompts. I think it got the look right this time and it jumped, but it wasn't quite like the exact movement that you did with your dog there.
Yeah,
So
and
this,
that was like pretty good fox-like movement too, I think. Like, it's interesting.
yeah,
But if you really just wanted him to do like what my dog did and not any of the other stuff, you could get into, it's gets
yep. And the
It's
the
very,
quality I'd say is getting pretty good on these Kling models, so definitely a good place to start. Um, I also tried out Grok Imagine and Kling Video to Video because these ones, in theory, you can give a reference video as well as a start frame. Or actually, this one you can't even give a start frame. You can just give the reference video. So we can see here, Fox isn't quite as photorealistic as we want. It does look like it's just kind of copy pasted into the scene. And then you had a comment around the frame rate that you filmed these things at versus the frame rate that seems to be coming out.
yeah. So I did shoot everything between like about 48 and 60 frames a second, and I would recommend that in general for your input videos because you can speed ramp from there to adjust whatever you want. But so this may look more slow motion than intended because of that. But I'm not, we'd have to look at the how everything got uploaded, interpreted, and what the base frame rate of the video was. But that may be
Yeah.
some of it.
And
There's
especially
a
when
general
you're,
rule like
yeah, go
animals
ahead.
look good in slow motion, kind of like otherwise, especially like a fast twitch, border collie or fox or whatever. They just seem annoying and a little too quick without that, I think, to people.
Totally, totally. And that's the frame rate is an important thing to look into, especially if you're kind of in the ComfyUI world or working with these models directly. Some of them were trained at specific frame rates as well. So Bruce, did you do anything under the hood to like match the frame rate when generating for these older models?
Well, I mean, because the specific model we used was kind of mostly trained on like 16 frames per second footage. But basically, if you tell it to adhere quite closely to the video, that just seems to override it.
Yeah, cool.
And it's so cool in Conductor, you've got like all these sliders and the adherence to reference and adherence to the motion and the thing and they're very powerful. And I mean, it took me a bit to get the hang of it and how it all worked, but suddenly once it starts to click, you can look at an outcome and really quickly adjust things to get it working the way you want it to work. And it was very cool, like the controls that Bruce gave me, and then and which included the way it handled the LoRas, and I could have all these different strings of different LoRas and things, and it was quite a dance between the what you put in the text prompt, what your input video was. There was no input images whatsoever for this, so everything was all the snow and everything is either from the LoRa or from the prompt, and so it was cool.
Awesome.
Like I felt
Yeah,
like I had a very very powerful tool between what you guys made to create things, and it was. I mean, I was so excited, like I was barely sleeping. Once everything was up and running, I really was making the thing. It was like so incredible.
yeah, those are the fun parts for sure. And the model that was used for this particular one, it's over a year old at this point, probably like a year and a few months old. It's this WAN 2.1 VACE, and VACE stands for Video Tasks All Within and All-in-One Framework for Creation and Editing, which I never remember. But it's open source, it's trainable, and honestly, it stands up pretty well against a lot of the models that are out there today. And the really cool part about this model, if you haven't seen it before, and we'll lead into some newer models that we did some testing with, but this model was trained to follow a bunch of different reference types as input. So there's reference video that you can pass in. There's reference pose that you could pass in. So if you had like, you know, pose generation of four people standing next to each other dancing, you could transfer that to four meerkats dancing here. You can also pass in depth as control, which is what we did in this project. So in this case, you can see this is like a depth map of a hallway here with very specific camera angles and movements, and then they're transferring that to this like mystical virtual world. And Bruce, under the hood in kind of your ComfyUI workflows, was it mainly the depth control or were there other tricks you did under the hood there?
Yeah, I think we tried the other thing, but it was basically the main thing was giving Matt sliders where he could adjust how much depth control and also just how much of the original video, because it's like you need to adjust those sliders per shot. So
Yeah,
yeah,
let
I
me
mean,
pull
I
up.
you
This
can
is
see
a
the really
good,
rough interface of that was an earlier version of Conductor, and yeah, we had sliders for like there was a reference influence and reference guidance, and that's basically video and depth. I would probably we I think we've subsequently renamed those sliders, but yeah, it was basically you figure out the best things on a bunch of shots, and then you let the director actually go and mess with it and give variations and try see, oh, the depth is too much in this, it's overriding it. The LoRa is too much. Yeah. It's more, yeah, it was just depth and video reference and a whole bunch of LoRas with controls.
awesome. And it under the hood, it's running ComfyUI. And I want to bring up some ComfyUI workflows to kind of show you the models under the hood and what was used and how you could do some of this yourself. But Bruce has kind of built a layer on top of that to just expose the details that you need. Um, cool. So next, I wanted to dig into what is a depth map, because that is important for these workflows. And um, an interesting thing to think about when you're working with depth maps is you have to use the same model that generated the depth map, or it's best practice to use that as the model was trained on. So there's this depth anything V2 model, and you'll see there's a little drop down for format. And a lot of these models that take in depth maps have a slightly different format, or you can have different ranges of depth values in your video there. If you've ever actually worked with like the raw Z values that come out of a game engine or something like that, that's where some of this data came from. And sometimes the raw values are like in meters, and sometimes they're in kilometers, and sometimes they're from 0 to 1, and sometimes they're from 0 to 255, and it's just like a whole range of different things that can happen under the hood there. So this one has a nice little drop down. You can pick WAN, which is the model that we're doing, the WAN 2.1 VACE, or there's like an LTX V that we'll dig into
I,
later.
yeah. Great. I actually think like those things are just that's an insane hack because these incredibly intelligent models can't even work with certain frame numbers. So a lot of
Mm,
the format stuff is also just, oh, if you give it a video of a certain frame length, it won't handle it.
yes, yeah, that's another good point. And that's why they have some of these sliders in here, I guess, for you to pick the specific frame rate and stuff that you need. But like WAN 2.1 base is like 16 frames a second and 81 frames,
Yeah,
if I
it's gonna be
remember.
like multiples of 4 plus 1. Yeah, it's just amazingly ironic that they've built a video editing tool that's more powerful than anything we've ever had that used to be, but it can't do a specific number of frames.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Um, so this was one of the more interesting shots, where the dog is like running behind the trees, and so the depth map is pretty important here to help guide the occlusion of the dog. I think this was one of the first shots that you guys were kind of doing proof of concepts on. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, this was weird. I mean, it's like this was one of the ones that it really was encouraging. You know, in the early testing, Bruce did a version of this, and I guess this is maybe when we had our sort of breakthrough and got everything really working well was when we got the depth map to work right. And that was like one of those shots that like I almost never had a bad version of that. It just was like picking between like hard choice between a whole bunch of different good ones. Like, there was no rhyme or reason to what shots were gonna. Well, okay, really long duration shots were really hard until we got the better machines, on the render end that could actually support more than like what was it, 89 frames, Bruce, or
Yeah, 81. We ended up
81?
our comfy script just got larger and larger and larger. I mean the design of conductor is that you can take just arbitrarily big and complex comfy scripts and drop them in. So it got bigger and bigger as we started to hack it more and more. Yeah, we got up to like 160 frames or so
Yeah.
on base at the
But
end.
but this was just one of those shots that just worked great all the time. And there were other shots that seemed like really simple that had very little going on that were just hard all the time. Like the foot coming by the pine cone, was one of those things. And I think I kind of have realized that, and this may be information that was important to people then and might not be in the future, but like for the depth maps, if there's something that's in the same depth or like near the dog's foot, like a fern or something, those are really hard to get rid of later. If so, I'm not going to go weed whack the forest, but choose a trail that doesn't have as many things growing right next to the dog's feet, or if the dog's going to be running through grass, like know that you are going to want the snow to be at least as deep as that grass to cover the grass or whatever it is that like, the foot contact is going to be a very difficult thing to like modify and tweak for this exact reason that, it's taking all the information from the depth map and figuring out those things. But this was
Kind of
just
why
so
you need,
exciting, like the
sorry.
having, go ahead, Bruce.
I was just saying it's kind of why you need a cloud-based solution because ideally you want to be filming this thing and just seeing what the depth map is. You want to be seeing it as it's generating while you're filming it or when you have a lunch break or something. You don't want to have your 6000 Pro NVIDIA machine in the forest with you. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, and just being able to do a bunch of these renders in parallel, not being like constricted by whatever machine you have. I just have this running locally, but you could see even generating that one depth map took about a minute. This model takes like 5 GB of VRAM, but there's other models that take a lot more. And going from the depth map to the actual video, that can take around 5 minutes per render. So Matt, I don't know if you have any takeaways from the actual inference process there, but I'll pull up one of the templates for Juan VACE while you talk about the render pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, on Conductor, it was like, it again, like another thing, it took a while to learn, the rhythm of it. But you kind of get good at, it was surprising that, a lower amount of steps didn't give a useful image in previewing what it's going to look like at a higher amount of steps. Like that took a while for us to figure out that there was no point in doing anything at a really quick low amount of steps. So I would kind of get I would kind of think of it as almost like just bracketing. Like I would fire off a whole bunch of renders with little adjustments either in the prompt or in the settings, and then essentially like go do something else, go for a hike with the dogs, or make lunch, or go to bed or whatever it was, and then come back and look at all of those and then see what worked and try to you know take those settings and then fire off a narrower spread again of things. And that was one of the cool things about Conductor is you can submit a whole bunch of renders really quickly with very small adjustments, and have it track those and then go back at those again and like and do it. So, if you have enough machines online, it's like a pretty insane tool to do that. But you have to kind of learn that rhythm of it. Don't sit and wait for them to come back. Like just go do something else, and then because it's not like in free pick or something, you get a render back in maybe like 10 minutes, which is still can be kind of painful, but like, these would maybe take, since we had to use a lot more steps, they could take, half an hour to an hour or more, depending on how many machines are online and what they were.
Yeah, when you're doing stuff with I mean, you're really pushing the model because it wants to do 81 frames. And when you're doing a really long shot, you go, oh, I want hundreds of frames and I want nice motion blur and I want the little pause of the fox to be right. It was very, very much pushing things. But I mean, I think we've been doing quite a lot of projects, not using Comfy, just using stuff on Oxen as well, and it's like from working, it's yeah. I don't want to just talk only about Conductor. I mean, I think on Greg's own platform, like the more they work with the artists, the more they set up a queue system, and there's this universal concept of, I mean, so Matt's talking about bracketing from the filmmaking perspective and the idea of like, oh, you can bracket your exposures as a stills photographer. But the similar concept, you find it in every single different discipline. Like in VFX, if you're doing explosion simulations, you have like wedge tests of different, trying out different variables. And I mean, Greg, from his computer science background, understands this concept of, oh, you'll keep one variable constant, like all variables constant, and you'll vary one thing, and you'll fire off a bunch of things. And like, it's interesting that the same way of working just comes up like over and over again. So,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, to figure out a good process to do testing if you're, if you're on the bleeding edge, and I think we were because I bled a lot. I'm pretty sure. So but if you're on the bleeding edge, you're gonna need to like you can't watch a YouTube video and learn how to do that. Then you guys are lucky you can watch this video maybe and learn something. But you'll want to do different things, and you're gonna just need to get in there and like figure it out and try a lot of different experiments and have a process to that makes sense for what you're trying to figure out.
Totally. I think having a project that you're actually working on and trying to bring to completion is the best way to learn. And Matt, you were even saying you gave yourself a deadline for this one because in AI,
Yeah.
you can just keep, it's like infinite actors with infinite takes. So like give yourself a deadline to,
Yeah. Yeah, there's no, I was lucky in a way. We had a trip planned overseas, and there was an agreement with my wife that I would not be working on this anymore once we got on the plane. And so, but it
nice,
was kind of up to the wire, and yeah, and
forced deadline.
everybody was like, okay, I'm done with the Fox. I've got to do something else. Like, so this is, I think even Hitchcock said like films aren't finished, they're just abandoned. And so I think that's probably true with AI projects. You get them a certain amount and then
Totally.
you just have to say like let go and because you can go rework it forever. And that being said,
Yeah,
we're talking about reworking this, so I'm not sure if it'll happen or not.
we'll
Yeah,
see. We'll see. Or pick up a new project.
yeah.
Um, Well, I did want to, I was kind of setting this up in the background as we were going through it, and adding a LoRa in here, but I also want to talk about the LoRa training. So you can see in ComfyUI, it's just a chain of nodes of models that you can put together. And I actually trained two Fox models, on a data set that Matt and Bruce provided. Bruce, I didn't have your original training run, so I tried to recreate some of
And
these.
James, we must include James for his.
Yes,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
James did a
didn't
James.
huge
really
amount of
do very
help.
much on
Yeah.
this. It was Matt and James were wrangling data sets and training Laura's, and I knew it was incredibly important.
Yep, yep. And there was one Laura for the actual landscape itself. So like transferring that Colorado look to this snowy look here. And I thought there was some interesting around the snow covered versus snow laden trees here.
Yes.
And even the process of captioning itself, I think, it can be a manual process, but it also helps you think through the problem a little bit. So, James, I don't know if you want to touch on captioning at all or things that you ran into here as you were creating these data sets.
Well, I mean, I really was brought into troubleshoot um, because the guys were getting, footprints and distant houses and stuff in there when they were inferring things. So basically, I went through like a detective through the original image sets. Noticed very distant like footprints, whatever. Which computer vision is a lot better than ours. So and it's going to pull what it can um, from an image when it's there. So it's a case of going through and photoshopping out little footprints and then creating an evenly weighted set of heavy snow, light snow, different skies, so that the environment became promptable. Um,
And I think that's
which it's a
a
great
good,
tool. It's a great tool for directors on the go. Like
totally.
oh, a bit more snow here or whatever.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and
even
I really,
the back and forth between like a tool like Photoshop or Matt, you mentioned Nano Banana earlier, just to like collect your training data set. There's a lot of different ways that you can curate this thing to get the perfect data set.
Yeah.
yeah, and I really believe like using automatic captions is a huge mistake and a wasted opportunity. I mean, it's not that you couldn't do it, but if you don't go in and really edit it and be like, no, I don't really agree with that. That doesn't look that way to me. Like, the
Yeah,
data set is almost like this toolbox. The captioning is weirdly like a toolbox you're gonna build because language is not at all precise, I think, or at least it's at least the way in terms of making this film, how describing a certain action or a mood or weather even or whatever. Like there's so much variation. That the old kind of a thing about Eskimos having all those words for snow and stuff. It's like, saying this trees have snow on them just doesn't nearly create enough precision. So you kind of need to like figure out what your description of that snow on that tree is. Is that snow laden or snow dusted or whatever it is, and I think I went into this thinking that I wanted it to not, because at this time a lot of AI was kind of corny. There was a lot of the training sets were all over the map, probably. Like the at least if you were asking for a fox, right? Like it had cartoon foxes, and there were like really low quality stock footage of real foxes, and possibly good quality shots of foxes, all kind of blended together. And so it was very hard to get it to really narrow down and give me like the fox that I wanted. And so I ended up picking, in terms of the Fox training, picking from, a bunch of images I found online, I guess stole, you might say. And and for the Snow World, we actually created all these images in Mid-Journey. And I really think the Snow World training was a better set to put in there. And I think in hindsight, I would have created a whole bunch of different foxes in different environments, or not different foxes, a whole bunch of versions of the same fox in different environments in AI instead of using real ones. Which is counterintuitive to where I was, 6 months ago, which was you want to introduce like analog reality to this, which was the whole point of shooting the dogs also. Um, does that make sense? Like, so I think that
yeah. And even like
like
we're scrolling through the foxes here, and to your point
yeah,
around like some of them have the black socks all the way up, some of them don't. So we're kind of like melding all of these foxes into our
yeah,
one fox LoRa. So we do get a consistent, unique fox out depending on how you caption.
yeah.
But
One
yeah,
of one of the big mistakes we made, and it's like you look at most of these foxes, you're like, oh, their eyes look light, but like in the lighting that we had, I had ended up with a lot of dark-eyed foxes, and I wish, in hindsight, I had either made all the foxes light in either Photoshop or when I generated them in AI, or I had captioned for like this is a dark-eyed fox and this is a light-eyed fox or whatever, so that I had a little bit more control, that I could boost the eyes, because I ended up just in Resolve, like cutting out the eyes and doing a little like a Adam's Family mask, on the foxes all the time to get their eyes to be a little bit brighter when it could have easily been taken care of in the training or the captioning even. So,
yeah.
that
And
was something, and it's like, yeah,
I feel like that's where AI, the base models, the models that everybody has access to, it's kind of like this blend of all styles into one that really goes right down the fairway, right? And with training, you can start to get that level of detail and that level of control to make your film differentiated from other people's. So like if you have a specific monster that you're working on or you have a specific fox that you're working on, you can make that call of this is what I want the eyes to look like. I don't want it to look like the run of the mill one. So I think it really puts the power back in your hand, the director, Matt.
yeah. And also, if you're an artist and you're gonna start working for a director, if you get hired on a Guillermo del Toro movie, trust me, like he has very specific ideas of what he wants stuff to look like, and you're gonna need to hit that target. It can't just be like something random you came up with. Like you're going to need to figure out how to get the AI to actually adhere to that vision that somebody else has, that they may be able to describe to you really well, or they might not be great at describing to you. So you're going to need to figure out how to do a very narrow progression of different looks of whatever it is you're trying to do that you can show to him or her to let them choose, and so you're going to get stretched when you start either working to a very specific vision that's either yours or someone else. It's going to be very different than just making cool shit and
Yeah.
you know
And you had an incredible quote of you're like, even a
yeah, it's like
10-year-old could prompt something, right? Look what I made. But
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
yeah, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, the consumer models are very much about like letting, you can sit down at those and make something cool in minutes, even if you have no experience. But like, it's kind of like moving the target to where the arrow hits and calling it a bullseye instead of, the other way you usually do archery. And it's it's just going to be something that it's going to separate, people, artists, and if you can reliably hit whatever it is that you want to do or do that for someone else, maybe.
Yeah, incredible. It's like it's really cool what you made, but is that what you wanted to make in the first place? Is that what you
Yes.
actually wanted to direct?
Right.
Um,
But
cool. Well,
that being said, like there's happy accidents, like when the dog's walking across the log and there's a waterfall behind it. Like I never thought of the waterfall. It came up in some render. That's another thing is like so in Conductor, like we could choose different seeds and it had a very big effect a lot of the time on things. And I would just do a little, again, it's a little spread, shotgun. Once I got good settings, like go look at like, 10 different seeds and see what it gave back. And one of them gave back this waterfall and I'm like, amazing, I need it. So, there's happy accidents too. Like, and that's a thing that you kind of take for granted on set. Like, you get a great sunset suddenly. You're like, oh, run up on that ridge and we'll get a long shot of that. Or, or the dog will do something amazing that you didn't anticipate or whatever it is that you're doing, you'll get these really cool little happy accidents that happen. But AI does that too. So, be open to those things also. But, you're still the decider of what fits in this film and what doesn't, and, make a coherent piece.
yeah, totally. And so getting back a bit to how you create this LoRa, just technically, if you guys are interested, it's pretty easy on services like Oxen. You can have all your pairs of images and prompts of what you want to direct later on. And a lot of time is spent on curating this data set, like we talked about. But once you have it ready, all you have to do is come in, click fine tune a model. You can fine tune different types of models. So if you just wanted to do an image generation or video generation, you can do that. And then again, there's some experimentation here on what model you want to use. This one was WAN 2.1 A14B, but there's also some newer models that can train on videos and even audio. And this LTX 2.3 Pro is one that I want to give a little sneak preview of next because I think if I were going to rank models that are out there today, I'd say WAN 2.1 VACE was the best one I'd seen in terms of directability. But this 2.3 Pro actually comes with a lot of fancy new features, and I'll pull up specifically this fine tune that the LTX people did themselves. It's a mouthful. I feel like machine learning people could be better at naming things. But this IC LoRa union control is the one that I found worked the best with the reference video that you collected, Matt. And you'll see if you I have to like search on this page to even find it. But the control types that you can pass in are canny edges, which you can kind of extract from any image or video, depth, like we talked about before, and pose. So I actually took this model, I got it up and running on Oxen, and I did a few tests with some of the reference footage that you put together. And let me pull that up so we can kind of
And Bruce,
see.
didn't we used Canny for a bit, right? And then, but once we went to depth, that was when things really started to work, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Like on a different thing, Kenny could have been the right thing. I think yeah, one of the big things of that Matt got right, which is also kind of a shared philosophy with Oxen and us, is you did enough tests. There's people trying to make this thing 100x cheaper. That's wrong. Like go like, oh no, we're gonna use a heck of a lot of compute. We're gonna try it out. And it's not gonna be, you're not gonna get your amazing video for 1 cent or whatever. But yeah, we oh yeah, oh that looks beautiful. I'll be quiet. Yeah, that's why you gotta test the new models.
You
Yes.
gotta, yeah, and I
I
mean,
know. Now
you
you're
went
making me like want to remake this thing and using LTX.
totally. I mean, I think even the
Yeah.
first week on projects that we've been working
Yeah.
on, Bruce is like, let's go try out the models. It's like R&D budget for the first
Yeah.
week or two, because the landscape does change so quickly. And so for this one, I just put in the depth map. I actually put in a reference image from Nano Banana as the starting frame. And then, yeah, I mean, the fur looks beautiful. The background might not have been quite what you wanted with the winter scene, but like pretty good for a single prompt.
Yeah.
Um, these are some of the other tests I ran. So the fox jumping off the log here. I think this one is a little better than the Kling ones that we were seeing before. And then I'd had Nano Banana turn the scene into a winter scene. So just like one prompt to get the new start frame. And now we've got the winter fox. Um, Maybe too snow heavy in this one. So again, the LoRa helps with like how much snow we're
Yeah.
putting on these things. Um, the movement's a little funny in this one, and the mouth is a bit open because the dog's mouth was open too. But this is where you're just kind of like taking a lot of shots on goal. But at least like we know the movement is going to be pretty close to the depth map that we passed in. So that helps narrow the search space of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I would say for anyone considering hiring a AI director, there's a bunch of you have there's a certain amount of team player necessity because once you understand every single shot takes a whole, even if you're using the absolute latest best model, you're still not going to get it perfect the first time. You have like a team of people, and it's some combination of technology. I don't know, Matt. I mean, was the Pixar experience or the live action, or was it just some combination of everything that makes what would you need for?
Weirdly, I'm going to say like training dogs is iterative in a weirdly similar way to AI, where you are rewarding and trying different things and changing the environment and trying to only change one thing at a time to figure out how to get the dog to do what it is. I find I mean I'm an animal trainer also. I do clicker training and a whole bunch of different kinds of training, and I feel like that weirdly is has helped me a lot in trying to get into the mind of another being. If we are going to be generous and call AI a being, I guess we can, and figure out what makes it, what input gets you what output, and then adjusting that the right amount to get the output you want.
Yeah, and it's a bit of the
But
scientific method to really
Yeah, I mean, being a director is more about like being organized and being able to fixate on what you're trying to make enough until you realize that there's a better way and then changing it the right amount, to that next thing. And working at Pixar was just being in the room with a ton of smart people and learning to like find someone like Bruce who's and you who know a lot and being able to ask the right questions and not try not to be a pain in the ass and just ask enough of the right questions to get what you need.
totally. And then, yeah, balancing those happy accidents, like you said before, with the
Yeah.
directability and leaving a little room to play, but maybe not all the room to play. It's a balance there, right?
Yeah, and I've heard tales of other AI projects when, the director's shown a lot of really cool things that would make their film a lot better, and they maybe don't bite at that because they lack the imagination, or they're stuck in a certain uh, path that they think they need to stay in, or whatever. But it's hard like to balance the exploration with the actual destination.
Totally. And before we wrap up here, is there anything else, as coming from being a cinematographer, that you found either helpful as a perspective coming into AI, or maybe AI made you rethink how you tackle these problems?
I mean, as a cinematographer, it makes me rethink if any cinematographer is going to have a job in like a year. I think that might be a problem. But the beyond that, in terms of shooting your reference videos, you know, it took us a while. Like we didn't really know that it was going to be the depth map that was what was going to drive the input. Most of the sort of composition and everything of the input. And when I shot this, it was more like, make a video and we'll figure it out. I mean, it was kind of all a big test, right? And the I think, oversampling a bit, like so shoot a little bit wider than you need, shoot in a with an open gate, something like a tall image so you can do a little framing up and down.
Hmm.
Shooting, I would recommend shooting at a high frame rate so you can speed ramp, I mean, everything that went into the renderer came out of my timeline at 24 frames a second. So all the input as far as to the AI was at 24, but everything that was shot was between like 48 and 60, depending on what it was. I think and this was a hard thing for me. Like that last shot of the fox running across the lake. The ground was incredibly ugly when I shot it. It was a drone shot, and it just was this like kind of dry ground. It didn't look anything like what I wanted, and to just be able to be like, I at that point had done enough tests. I was like, don't worry about it. Like it looks vile to you right now. You never would shoot that and use it in a real project, but it's all going to be replaced with snow. So just forget about that. And like, this thing that you don't like, that doesn't matter. It's more like, like figure out what it is that you're making and how it's going to be used by the renderer. And don't worry about stuff that you would never do if it was an image you were going to use as a live action camera true, whatever we want to call it anymore, image.
Yeah.
Because like these 10 things are going to change. Like these two things are really important, like your framing and the action.
Yeah, and the story really defining
Yeah.
what you
Well, yeah, the
want
story,
as
of
the
course, but
output.
yeah,
Yeah, I think is
you know,
is even more
y-
important in a world where you can create anything. It's like, are you creating the right thing? And do you have
yeah,
kind of like the taste, you know?
yeah. And for this video input, just, in terms of like the camera, and I use just like a Lumix, S12, which is a nice, good current camera, but, it's not anything special. I mean, I have like a red, I have nice stuff. That's pretty unimportant. Like, I don't think there would be, like I think if you set your iPhone to 60p and used like a cinematic mode for closer shots, you probably would be fine to shoot with. You might want the controls of a bigger camera, but it's not so important for this. Like I think I would encourage everyone to try shooting a little test and throw it in as a video input model and see what you get, and then iterate on that a few times and just kind of see what it's all about because it's pretty interesting, and I don't think a lot of people are using it.
Yeah, incredible. Well, we're running up on time here. I appreciate your point of view, coming from the industry and your background is it's really refreshing to hear, how you can still
Thank you
have
guys.
creative control and yeah, just appreciate you coming on and sharing what you learned.
Yeah. So Tina's asking, how do I reward AI? Yeah, I don't know. It's like
Trial and
I have
error.
thought about that. Like I wish there was something where I was like, good job, because it's like we're really used to being positive, being like, with the dogs at least, right? Saying like, like let them know that you did good. And that's uh I wish there was like a thumbs up that you could kind of give it, being like that was a good render, or be like, oh, not so good, like
Yeah.
we don't
Well, the training
I
data can get
imagine.
you there almost. It's just like a really slow iteration cycle.
I mean, does anyone know? Are the aggregators like seeing what I download or what I just move on from, and is that data being harvested at all? I would
Oh,
it'd be
I
strange
mean,
if they weren't, but
100% for the big providers. Also, just a shout out of a reason to use Oxen is we don't do that stuff. So you keep your data private and you kind of define what you want to reward the model with, and we don't kind of scrape it and
nice.
train our own models.
But it'd be cool if there's some way to give some feedback, like how do you feel about the shot, and a little like smiley face
Move
or
it
whatever, and
forward.
it's like so it would know that like you failed me in this instance.
Love
Yeah.
it. All right. Thanks,
Cool.
y'all. We can kill the
Thank you
recording.
guys. I really enjoyed this, and it's fun to talk with Greg and have. Thank you very much, Bruce and James, for taking time to be on this, and like
Yeah,
thank you guys for supporting me in the film too. Like it wouldn't be anything without you guys. So that was amazing.
awesome. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you next week.